The deferred maintenance credit. Now, I'm going to go over two of these so you start to get a feeling for what these are. There's more than this, by the way. I'm just going to give you a flavor of this. Is that cool? Okay. Is that cool, Pierre? Okay, just checking. Pierre, your wife has a question. Normally we go to the mic for this.
Sorry, that's right.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. Just saying. Is there something you want to ask at the mic?
No.
No.
I just wanted to make a statement. So
You wanted to
if
make a
a
statement.
You don't have to go to the mic, right?
What is it,
I
Louise?
just want to say this can also work for a single-family home if you're buying a turnkey operation, right?
Yeah, if you're buying something with a lender that doesn't have those restrictions, absolutely. It could work for a single-family home. So what I want to cover here is two credits. Two of my, I guess, favorite credits. The first one is going to be the rent credit. In your sales contract, it's very typical for you to have rent credits prorated. Let's say that we're talking about my building there that I bought, which was, by the way, 90 units. Okay? Now, in those 90 units, let's say the average rent was $600. $600 per unit. And we were 90% occupied. So that means we've got 81 units at $600. Okay? So we take 81 times 600, and we get how much? 46,000? 48,600. Okay, 48,600. We'll take that 48,600, and what we want to do is we want to get a daily rate for that. To do that, we are going to divide that by 30. 48,600 divided by 30 is how much? How much? 16. No. 16,200.
1,600.
No. No. What is it? $1,620.
What I said.
You said 1620. Is it 1620? I guess it is. Jerry, I'm sorry. I misheard you. 1620. Maybe I've been drinking this morning, Jerry. You never know. Just coffee, though. I just didn't hear you right what you were saying. Okay, cool. So 1620. So what that is telling us then is we have a credit here, or a rent that comes in based on its occupancy at 1620. Let's say that we're closing on the 15th. So depending on the state, sometimes this is different, but in Illinois and Indiana and other areas, the day of closing belongs to the buyer. Other states, the day of closing belongs to the seller. Do you know as an attorney what that does here in Nevada? The day of closing belong to the buyer or seller? The day of closing, does it belong to the buyer or seller in Nevada?
I'm not familiar with how you're phrasing it. You might phrase it differently.
Okay, well, we'll get together at the break. Maybe we can get you in the program. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Hey, Steve, you won't believe this. I just signed up the attorney. Yep. Can you imagine? Anyway, we'll talk later. I'll get you maybe a discount. Okay, so if we close on the 15th, let's just say the day of closing belongs to the buyer. That means the buyer gets that day and all the rest of the days of the month. So we've got 15 days of the month of credit that we're getting. So we'll take that 1620 and we'll times it by 15, and we get how much?
24,300.
24,300. Okay. That is going to be our credit that gets applied to our closing statement. Does everybody see that? So if our credit of 24,000 is applied here, it's also applied as a debit on this side of the closing statement. Does everybody see that? Okay. So, I work off these credits. That's just one of them. The reason I like a rent credit is because that's a credit, by the way, that you do not have to pay back. It's like free money. Right, Pierre? Free money. Who doesn't like free money? I'll do my Seinfeld impression just for Gavin. What is the deal? Anyway, so free money, 24 grand coming right off of the amount that you've got to bring to closing. I like this credit idea. So in creative financing, I have a vision of all of these things. I'm also considering, hey, when am I going to close this deal? You might say, well, wouldn't you want to close on the first day of the month to get all the credit? Well, typically the way sales contracts are written up is that it's based on what rent is collected. So I usually like to close around the 7th if I could, for that reason. If you put a statement in your contract that says something like this would be something you'd want to write down, by the way, is buyer has the right to receive, I may be spelling receive wrong, is that right? I before E except after C. I just completely R-E, to receive a full month's rent credit for all occupied units regardless of the day of closing. What's interesting about this statement, putting it into your sales contract, is this. This is how you turn that $24,000 credit into, we're going to take 16,020 times 30, and it's 48,600. You've just taken your credit from 24,000 to 48,000. Now again, that's something that I'm putting in the contract, okay? I want to make sure that you like that one, don't you? This is how you start to diminish your down payment. Would a seller say, hey man, I'm not going with this statement that you got in there, we're going to change that up a little bit? Sure, they might. But if you don't ask, you never get. Questions are the answer. And if you just follow what I'm saying here with regard to seller psychology, the seller is motivated by price. The buyer is motivated by terms. The reason I'm getting this possibly from the seller is I'm giving him the 3.15 asking price. If something's listed, let me just say this to you. If something's listed, you can pick any number you want, by the way. If something's listed for $3 million, in the seller's mind, what do you think he's willing to accept on average for that? He or she? 2.7, about a 10% discount. In their mind, they've already discounted that. They've already said, hey, I'm listing this for $3 million. But I know that if I got an offer at the end of the day, I would take 2.7. They've already discounted that 300 grand in their mind. What I'm telling you to do is to use that 300 grand for your advantage through credits like this. I'll give you your asking price if you give me my terms. Does everybody see that? This is probably the most powerful way that you can do creative purchasing, financing in real estate, are these credits. Let me take you one step further. Is that okay with this? I'm going to talk about something that I like to call the rent subsidy credit, and then I'll do deferred maintenance. The rent subsidy credit. Some of these credits you just make up. I actually made that one up like 5 years ago. So I would look at properties and I would see dead people. No, kidding. I'm kidding. I would look at properties and I would see that, number one, there was terrible management in place. Number two, there were vacancies in place. And, you know, I saw, as an investor coming in, I saw that as risk. Whenever you're asking someone, by the way, to carry seller financing, you need to, like what he talked about yesterday, you need to ask them and give them in the same motion. Mr. Seller, because of, or maybe start like this. Mr. Seller, in my due diligence, I found that 40% of your leases are expiring in the next 2 months. Because of that, I would like you to share in that liability with me by giving me seller financing for 2 years. I would like you to share in that liability, right? So, when I started to look at properties and I saw either no leases in place or I saw vacancies in place, I wanted to do what people do in the .com arena or the tech arena. You see all these .coms and tech companies being sold for billions of dollars, and you're like, well, they're not making widgets, but somehow they figured out a way to monetize their business. Monetize it through advertisements on that web page, or they sell the database or something. You see that concept, right? So I wanted to take that same concept and monetize my... One of the ways you do that is by asking for seller financing. Another way that you do that is by implementing something like a rent subsidy credit. So let's go back to our 90 units here. So in the 90 units, let's say that, and this wasn't necessarily the case with the 90, but I'm going to stay with that example. Let's just say that 20% of those units, or 18 of those units, have no lease. And let's say that another 18 units have a lease, but it's expired. And that typically, in most states, from a year lease, you have a lease in place, they don't put another one in, it's a month-to-month kind of arrangement. So, have a lease, but expired. This is a risk to me. And the reason that this is a risk to me is this. As an investor, when I come in and I take over the property, I'm always considering two things: my income flow and my expense flow. The income comes in, the expenses go out, and the residual that's left is NOI. From that residual, I have to pay my debt service. My debt service is paid, and then I get to keep the cash flow. Food on the table, clothes on the kids, gas in the car. But when I see stuff like this, I say there's a risk there. I want to monetize that. So typically, it takes me about 4 months when I take over a property to iron out the wrinkles, to get everything working smoothly, about 4 months, unless there's something extraordinary there, maybe a bank REO or the management was absolutely terrible, something like that, but 4 months. I'll discount that a little bit, let's just say to 2 months. I'll cut that in half. And I'll say I've got 36 units here that basically they could move out at any time because they're not tied to a lease. So what I'd like to do is monetize that. 36 times 600 is how much, Raphael? What is it?
$21,600.
$21,600. So that's what is that? Well, that's going to be 1 month. Typically I'll go 2, but we'll just stay here with the 1. I'll put this in as a rent subsidy credit during my due diligence, during my negotiation, as 21.6, and I'll explain why. I'll also do this in this fashion. Let's say that we know the market rent is 600, but I've got 12 units at 500. So I'll take 12 times that $100, and that's how much? $6,000. And let's say I may not go after the 21.6, but I'll definitely ask for a rent subsidy credit there, because in property management you have something that's called lost to lease. Lost to lease. That's an important expense that you should be monitoring because it is an expense to you. This $6,000, when you're managing a property, let's say you buy your 12-unit building and you've got, or Charles, and your 8-unit. Let's say you've got 8 units and the average rent there, which I don't know what it is, let's say it's $700, and you've got all those tenants paying $700, but the market rent is $800. You can take $100 times 8, which is $800, and that's going to be lost to lease. You can use that as an expense to go against the income on that property. Does that make sense? I want to take that same advantage when I'm going into the property, and I create that and I monetize that as a credit at close. Does everybody see that? So we need you up at the mic, Ken, if you got a question. Does he do that at home, Susan? Ken, he just blurts out. He just blurts out, Susan, does he do that at home?
I don't know.
You don't know?
What do you do?
Ken, does he just blurt out at home? He doesn't have a mic? Yes, Valerie.
Okay, went from 36 units down to 12. Why?
This is another way that I use it. Let's say I've got 12 units that are paying $500 in rent. The market rent is $600. That's $100 times 12. You see my point?
Yeah, I see the difference.
Okay.
Lost differential. Now you talked about it generally takes you 4 months to get up to stream, and then you discounted that back to 2 months.
Just because maybe I don't think the seller's going to give me the 4 months.
I agree, but you have 36 times 600, and then you have 21,600. Why would you take 21,600 multiplied by that by 2?
That was another example, Valerie. That was another example. I'm just saying you can go a different route. Forget about that one. This was a second example of how I use the rent subsidy credit.
Okay, I see that there's 2, but I guess then the first question is that would it still be left at 21,600, or would it you take that 21,600 and multiply that by 2 for 2 months?
You would multiply that by 2 for 2 months. This is just 1 month of that.
I'm just
Yes.
trying to understand that.
Yep, absolutely. So you've got to kind of form fit it to the situation. If you know the seller's not going to give you, this is 1 month, this 21.6. If you know the seller's not going to give you 4 months of that, or basically 84,000 plus, you're going to have to kind of tailor that a little bit. But you're going to tell the story of the 4 months. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes?
So for 12 units, that might
It's not on.
It's not on? Well, that does us a lot of good. It doesn't turn on by blowing in it, Ken. Let me see that. He's like, how do you turn?
The other end. There it is. I heard something. Does that work? The finger trip?
After I hit the button. We may need batteries in this still. So you're going to have to talk really
I
loud.
didn't even have to sit down.
Or you may need to talk right into my chest. Come here. State your question. Come on. Come to Papa.
Well, the hair, I'll pick the hair off. Okay, so 12 months.
Yeah?
Where's that? 12 units, $500.
Right.
Okay, market value $600. So you're losing $100 a month.
Right.
So that's 12 times 100 is only
1,200.
1,200.
Oh, did I write that wrong? Okay. So
That's
that's
it.
1,200. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Was that your confusion?
Yeah, well,
Thank you for clearing that up, by the way.
you bet, big guy.
I'm sorry, I wrote that wrong. So that's 1,200. I don't know why I wrote 600 on there. So if that was your question, I see. So I will take this as a credit at closing. Does everybody see that as a rent subsidy credit? I don't want to turn this into the multifamily side yet. We're going to handle a lot of this in Chicago. I just want to show you creatively how I go to closing and I lower that down payment. Does everybody see this? Anybody have a question on this? Okay.